And the Florida Senate today voted down a proposal on a statewide ban on assault weapons here in Florida. Tucker.
Matt, thanks a lot. Sheriff Scott Israel would never blame his own repeated failures for the shooting at Stoneman Douglas High School. Instead, he needed to blame an organization that was not involved, the NRA. During CNN's 1984-esque town hall meeting last week, Israel played the demagogue against NRA spokeswoman Dana Loesch. Watch.
You just told this group of people that you are standing up for them. You're not standing up for them until you say, I want less weapons.
Dana Loesch joins us tonight. Dana, when I was watching that, my first thought was he doesn't sound much like a sheriff. He sounds like someone running for office, a Tammany politician, a red-faced blowhard, a demagogue. It doesn't sound like something a law enforcement official would say in a town hall. What do you make of that?
I completely agree with you, Tucker, and I'm so glad that you're talking about this, because this is ultimately, this is the failure, and this is where the failure took place. It was with this man and his leadership as Broward County Sheriff. And I'll have everybody know, Tucker, as well, before the sheriff took that stage, him and I sitting up there for this town hall, he was allowed to go out and give a rally-style speech in which he railed against special interests and was naming the NRA and really setting the stage up to go after 5 million law-abiding innocent Americans who didn't get all of the 45, I think is what BuzzFeed reported, tips that his office received. They didn't have the murderer calling his office himself, telling him that he thought he was a threat and that police needed to do something. Family members weren't calling the NRA reporting this. They were calling his office. And so he has a lot of explaining to do. And one more quick thing, Tucker. I asked the sheriff on stage whether or not he could have actually arrested this murderer based on a Florida state statute that treated anyone sending electronic or written threats of bodily injury, harm, or death to other individuals, as this murderer did with his classmates, whether he could have arrested that individual charged with a felony. And the sheriff did indicate that he could, but then he glossed right by it and wanted to refocus and shift responsibility away from his dereliction of duty. I think he owes a lot of innocent Americans an apology.
Well, but it's also really troubling because, I mean, this guy's not a congressman from Camden. He has the power to put people in jail, to take their lives away from them. He's a law enforcement official, and this behavior seems reckless and dishonest and weird, comparing yourself to, to MLK and Gandhi. I mean, does it seem like there's something wrong with him?
And, you know, you mentioned that Game of Thrones quote, the lion doesn't worry about the opinions of the sheep. Well, he mentioned that again yesterday in a radio interview with a South Florida station, and he was attacking all of those, including the congressman that you just had on, the lawmaker that you just had on, the state of Florida, who was calling for his resignation. And, you know, I agree with you. I wish that this would have come out on the stage. I wish that this truth would have been known at that particular time. It seemed as that he was more interested in turning this into a campaign stop. And I will say that this really explains why the Coral Springs police chief came out against the Broward County Sheriff the way that they did. They said in a statement that the truth is going to come out because Coral Springs police reacted. They were the first ones in, and they seem to be really calling the Broward Sheriff out on what I can only assume to be showboating was what they were suggesting in their letter. And there had to be a lot of drama behind the scenes for other law enforcement officers who really, I mean, these are the guys who, I mean, they sacrificed. They ran in, they heard the sound of gunfire and screaming, Tucker, and they ran in and they did what they could to save innocents. That's why we love our law enforcement, because of what they do for us. And now it's no wonder that they came out against this Broward County Sheriff.
It's also transparent, though. I mean, I'm not blaming the shooting on the sheriff. He didn't commit the shooting, but a series of missteps by his agency allowed it to happen. He's culpable in some way, and yet he's diverting all the attention to others. It's the most basic and recognizable kind of butt covering. Why does the press not point that out?
I wish they would. I mean, what we're talking about is systemic failure here. And Tucker, I mean, here you had the 45 reports into this sheriff's office. You also had 2 FBI reports. But even bigger than that, we've had decades of the political class ignoring the mental health crisis here in the United States, and politicians who have refused to report dangerous people who are been adjudicated unfit, dangerous to themselves or others, to the NICS system. And so this is why we at the NRA have been pushing for targeted action and offering solutions on this, and we're going to continue to do so.
Yeah. So if you run a city with tens of thousands of mentally ill people living on the sidewalk and you're lecturing us about guns, you know, maybe time to wake up a little bit. Thank you, Dana. I appreciate it.
Ready to debate this? We have two segments. Stay with us. Joining us now on stage, NRA spokesperson Dana Loesch, who was there last night. Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, Fox News correspondent at large Geraldo Rivera. Thank you, Bishop. Good job. Nice to see you. And Dan Bongino.
What's up, bro? Good to see you, man. Hey, homie.
Grab a seat. Grab a seat.
Got your water.
Yeah, thanks. This is great.
Wow.
First, I want to say I obviously didn't watch because they're on at the same time, but I watched later. And number one, you did a phenomenal job under the most difficult circumstances. I got to give you. Bring us behind the scenes. You were called a murderer. Burn her. What else?
Yeah, well, let me set the stage for you. And first off, I want to say that it's hard to be a teenager. It's hard being a grieving teenager. And it's hard being a grieving teenager who's being exploited by a media and made to grieve or asked to grieve publicly on a national stage. This was an arena full of survivors, victims' parents, and other community members. There were over 7,000 people that were in this arena, Sean. Mm-hmm. And when we entered, you kind of entered like you were Floyd Mayweather going into the ring. I mean, literally, like you came in from part of the arena and you walked through between all these people and you got up on stage. It was pretty chaotic. It started even before I got up on stage to talk. And the whole reason why I showed up there is because the NRA is made of over 5 million members who are also parents.
I'm one.
You're one of them, and you're a parent. Mm-hmm. And we didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
We weren't the ones. I mean, why is it that we're held responsible when here, just as you mentioned, just today we learned that the sheriff's office, here you had a deputy who waited upwards of 4 minutes before they went in. And, Sean, we also found out, it was reported this morning, that the parents had reported this murderer to police before. There's a report out there, the records have been discussed in media, where they told police he has threatened people with a gun before. He has held a gun to others' heads. Now, I'm not a member of the FBI. I'm not a member of law enforcement. I love what they do. I appreciate what they do.
You're not doing this because you're being paid either. You do.
I've been a Second Amendment supporter and an NRA lifetime member for a long time. That was a cheap shot. That was a cheap shot by the sheriff because he's trying to cover his backside.
Point of view, that's fine, but what he did was wrong.
It was wrong, and he has questions to answer.
All right, let me ask you one quick question because we have you for two segments, which is great. What other names were you called while you were on that stage?
I was called a "See you next Tuesday." They said burn her, murderer. I heard a lot of murders, and then they tried to. Cersei Lannister chanted me shame as I walked out. And I did not. I looked at every single person.
So they wanted Jerry Springer last night.
Yeah, it was, and that's what I mean. Honestly,
that's why we have Geraldo.
Yeah, I mean, CNN should have let their
the original Jerry Springer.
They should have. No chairs were thrown. No chairs were thrown. But that's when CNN should have let their cameras go because that was the money shot that they wanted. I'm sure, right? But people try to rush the stage. There was a woman who rushed the stage.
That's scary.
And at one point, Jake Tapper turned and looked at me and said, "Do you have an escort? You need to get out of here right now. You have got to get out of here right now." And if I did not have a 3-person detail with me, I would not have gotten out of the arena.
That's scary.
And that is not an exaggeration.
In all fairness, Geraldo, he's one of my best friends in life. I love him. I disagree. We disagree on some things. You believe in the Second Amendment.
I do.
You agree with what I outlined for security measures.
I absolutely agree with it. But Dana said, it is hard being a teenager. I'm the father of 5. 4 of them have passed through the teenage years. It is hard being a teenager. So why in the world does the NRA resist raising the age for the purchase of these deadly weapons from 18 to 21, as the president now advocates?
Well,
this simple change, I want the NRA to embrace this change. I want the NRA. Here's a kid who was visited 39 times by the cops. Here's a kid, they wouldn't let him carry a knapsack into the school.
They banned
and
the
yet
backpack,
this kid
but they
could
didn't
buy
ban
an
him.
AR-15 legally?
Right, hey,
Please,